Coming, and we have some visitors tonight, so thank you very much. We know, just so we know who we are.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Steve Smith, the Assistant Director for Highways and Waste, and I'm joined by John Coombs from Kia, who's the General Manager for this contract, and Rob Carroll, who's the Operations Manager for this contract.
Thank you very much. I think everyone else is well known. So thank you very much for coming to this meeting, and we start off with apologies for absence.
I just have one apology, and it's from Councillor Valerie Anslow.
Okay, and Councillor Binley also gave his apologies because he couldn't make it. Members' declarations of interest. Councillor Coleman.
Could I declare an interest in item 4? My husband worked for Marriott's, which became Kia, and he's now on a pension with some shares.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's just a personal interest, I think. Any others? No? Okay, thank you very much. Next item, the minutes of the meeting on the 31st of October, which you've all got a copy of. Is everyone happy that they're a true record? Haven't noticed any problems myself. Okay, can I have a proposer? Councillor Wilkes and Councillor Coleman to second. Thank you very much. So we'll get on to the substantive item, new highways contract provider, and Steve Smith is here to start us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought I'll take you through on a PowerPoint presentation to make it a little bit more interesting rather than just going through the paper. So I think it's important to recognise that this is a completely new contract. I think it's easy to think that because the old contract was with Kia WSP and this is with Kia, that things were sort of the same, but there's actually quite a big change between the WSP element and that transferring to Kia. So it wasn't smooth sailing and carrying on as was for the previous contract. There were lots of systems that needed to be replaced and brought into being. Not lots of new staff that need to be brought onto the contract because quite a lot of the old staff moved with WSP. And of course, the split between the West and the North meant that some staff had to be split between different councils, and therefore there was quite a significant change back on 12th of September 2022 when this started. Kia, it was also fair to recognise that we were planning for a 6-month mobilisation. We contracted that down to 3 months. So all of that activity to change everything was down to quite a quick and rapid response from Kia. So one of the new elements of this contract was the fact that we've got a whole new suite of performance indicators, and that's really what I've come to discuss today about how Kia have performed against those performance indicators in the first year of operation. So a reminder of what the contract covers. Covers most of the highway maintenance aspects, some of the rights of way, road safety, the design services. So anything we're doing that requires designs for various things, such as major road schemes and the like, are included with that. Winter services and a lot of the customer and member engagement. What it doesn't include is street lighting, which is with Balfour Beatty. And a lot of the client transport functions. So when we're bidding for money from government for things like LC whips and stuff like that, that's retained within the council. And also street works and development control was brought back in to the council in order for us to take more control of that. So we've got a street works team now that oversees not just the utilities but the works of Kia as well. So there's an independence to how what works on or activity on the streets takes place. So as I said, there was a whole new suite of performance indicators covering 9 themes, 45 measurable indicators on that. These are reviewed monthly, quarterly, annually, depending on sort of the particular indicator. And they really are the sort of the day-to-day, how are Kia performing. We've then got the strategic performance indicators, of which there's 3 categories, and that's more about what's the relationship with the council. And those are linked to contract extensions on the basis that if things are going well, why would you not want to extend? There's a responsible owner on both the client side and on Kia for each of those indicators. So there's a lot of check and challenge on the validity and the way in that those indicators are measured. And all of these are sort of reported through the contract management teams on a monthly regular basis at our governance meetings through the systems that Kia have and via Power BI, which gives us some really good information to get down into the detail and interrogate some of these reports. So again, just to let you know some of the activity that takes place every single day through Kia. And again, I think sometimes we forget exactly how much work does take place. It's easy to think about how many potholes aren't fixed, but 19,000 potholes Kia fixed for us last year, which is around 300 a day. So quite significant productivity in the area. Got 4,000 tonnes of salt that we store, and that's spread over the network during winter. We've got operational safety inspections, so they are every single road in the area is inspected at least once a year and some more than that. So they are completed on a regular basis. And we've got instant responses. So again, it's all very well thinking about what the planned activity is, but things don't always go as planned, and there's accidents on the highway, there's flooding. And last year there was 1,355 of those responses that Kia had direct activity to addressing some of those. And we also did the resurfacing of roads, and we resurfaced almost 37,000, just over 37,000 square metres of carriageway last year. So the performance indicators are set down, as I said, in eight different categories. And these are very much based around the council's own policies. So Kia are asked to do what our policies require them to do. And that's linked between network management, making sure that they're on the highway when they say they're going to be on the highway. Capital maintenance, making sure they're bringing forward and delivering the schemes we're asking for them. Routine maintenance, which is much more around the pothole repairs and defect repairs, and similarly reactive maintenance, all around that. The general thing you'd think of highway maintenance, of going in, doing the grass cutting, doing the gully emptying, repairing potholes. Again, I think it's worth recognising that that is against our policy, and our policy for pothole repairs is kept broken down into 4 different categories of P1, P2, P3, P4, and each of those has an intervention level, and each of them has a timescale within which to repair roads. And the P3 and P4 are the ones people tend to comment most on, and they are 28-day repair and 180-day repair. So there's quite a lot of requirement on the council to meet those deadlines, and therefore we make sure that we put quite a lot of performance indicator measurements around them to make sure we're getting what we need, and as a council we're meeting our requirements under the policy. Out of all those indicators that were measured, there were 4 really in that time that we had queries on out of the 142 reported. It's fair to say that these indicators were only measured under a contractual term from April. So some of these that were flagged as not meeting performance were before we were able to put in any mechanisms to address formally some of these issues. But we wanted to include some of the things that, particularly in the early days of the contract, were of concern. So the reactive maintenance was, out of the number of defects that were reported, Kia was struggling to deliver some of those over the winter period. And as I said in the report, a lot of that was most of the country was struggling to deal with the amount of defects that were coming in over the network. It was as a result of a particularly cold winter, and as in winter, potholes ramp up because what we call the freeze-thaw effect occurs. You get water going into cracks in the highway, it freezes, expands, pushes away the surrounding road surface, contracts again, then freezes, and you begin to break things out. So you see a huge increase in potholes over winter. And quite frankly, there isn't enough capacity in the whole supply chain in the country to deliver services against all those potholes. So Kia, in exactly the same way as every other authority's contract teams, are desperately trying to get into the supply chain to bring additional capacity into the network in order to address these, because they've not got lots of gangs twiddling their thumbs ready for all the number of potholes that come back. Similarly, incident response in October 23, marginally below on the timeless response. That was mainly to do with there was a lot of flooding events in October. At times they were slightly stretched on that, but they're marginally under. And then customer satisfaction, and again that's linked back to the amount of potholes. That's typically it's the potholes being reported through our reporting mechanisms on Street Doctor, and the response and ability to get out and meet our deadlines in responding to those. And again in April, because we had such a large amount of network breaking up, at times they weren't meeting the deadlines that we'd imposed. It's not all about things going wrong. We've got several compliments for the highway service, because they have been proactive in trying to get out and explain what's happening to people. We get quite a lot of good feedback from some parish councils where we've gone out and discussed what's going to be happening. But the amount of complaints and compliments we get, it's a fairly small number when we see the total inquiries of 11,500 inquiries that were dealt with last year. Kia also held 6 member engagement sessions to bring members up to speed in what's happening in their own areas. And we've also got the North Northamptonshire Local Access Forum, which is the Rights of Way meeting that is supported by Kia as well as 14 drop-in sessions. As I said, the main areas of concern we've had with Kia through the first year, there was a point where we had concerns about the quality of works, and I'm sure some of you have flagged to us some other quality issues that you'd seen. Again, very much to do with the excessive workload coming through in April, and Kia trying to find sort of capacity within the supply chain that sometimes didn't deliver in the way we would expect. But I'm pleased to say that whenever issues were found with some of that quality of work, Kia took prompt action, and we're now working together. We've both got quality inspectors that go out and do random samples of all the works, and we keep a log of any concerns we have, and I'm pleased to say that log is very few issues now we see of that. There'll always be the occasional quality issue. That's just the nature of the sheer workload we've got, but generally we're finding the quality of work is acceptable for what we would expect. Similarly, defect repair performance, they've exceeded their repair requirements over the last few months. So whilst winter was tough, summer, when there's not quite so many potholes, they've really put the effort in to get back that backlog, and have been doing far more pothole repairs per month than we get reported through. The other part of the contract that we find important is this social value requirement. So it's not just about fixing potholes and things, it's about what added value does someone like Kia, an organisation the size of Kia, bring to North Northamptonshire. So we set a target of 30% of turnover value per year to be delivered through social value. And this year the target was £9 million a year. Actually, the turnover was closer to £22 million, so the target would have been revised down to about £6-7 million. But Kia have generated £13.8 million of social value through the contract, and I'm going to hand over to John in a little while to explain what Kia have been doing to deliver that amount of money. We're also not just sitting back doing what we always did. We're looking at different ways of innovation, different materials to mend roads, different equipment to be utilised. And there's a joint innovation group where we look at anyone's able to look at any innovation that's coming out, submit it to the group for consideration and see, is that something we can bring onto this contract? And then if it's felt that it's going to add value for money, we discuss with Kier how do we bring that onto the contract. And we're not sitting on our laurels of the first year. There's been a lot of activity to get the contract up and running and to a position where we're happy. But we've got ambitions to do more within the contract. And certainly Kier have been very proactive in their sustainability proposals. The contract requires quite a challenging sustainability proposal. But as you'll imagine, this first year has been about getting everything up and running and operating, and now we're moving forward to that. Well, what else do we deliver over the next few years? Looking at inquiries apps, so we're dealing with Fix My Street, and we're looking to expand the usability of that for people so that we can expand that beyond just hire works into more street scene, abandoned vehicles, street lights, etc. And Kier have also been working a lot more closely with other teams within the council than perhaps in previous contract. So they're doing a lot of work with the waste team and coordinating with the waste team to make sure that the works they're undertaking don't disrupt waste collection days. So in the past, perhaps the works would have gone in on the same day as a waste collection team, but there's a lot of discussion between particularly Rob and our waste team to make sure that anything we're doing is either not disrupting what we're already doing as a council, but more importantly, taking opportunities to add value as well. So whenever there's a road closure out, Rob and the team are speaking to other teams within the council to say, well, we've got this road closed, what do you want to do at the same time? So we go out and do litter picking, we do the ground maintenance and mow the grass, so we're not having to pay two lots of money for traffic management. Similarly, not disrupting the road users twice. And there's also been a lot of support from Kier on some of their more corporate activities. So health and safety has been really important to us as a team because we manage quite a few of our own in-house teams. And Kier have been really good in providing us with support in rolling out some of their own health and safety training to our own teams. So there's been a lot of activity above and beyond what we just do for the highway maintenance. And I'm going to hand over to Rob now to explain more about Kier's approach. So not to Rob, to John, to explain more about Kier's approach to the contract.
Thanks, Steve. Do you mind if I just move your laptop so I can see what I'm... Thank you. So, thank you all. Really pleased to be here. So I suppose we've been on a real sort of big sort of step change compared to where we were previously. So Kier were in what it was Northamptonshire County Council for around 15 years under NCC. It was a very different world back then, different contract, different KPIs, not many KPIs. The governance was completely different. But towards the end of that contract, when the two new contracts came out to bid for two separate contracts, WSP decided to go in one direction, and we decided Kier to go in another direction. And we bid for both contracts, and we could have ended up being completely sort of unsuccessful. We could have been awarded one, or we could have been awarded both, and we were sort of over the moon to be awarded both. And with that came some shared sort of savings across both contracts. But it's a completely, I've been here for about 2 years now, and as I sort of helped demobilise the old contract and sort of transition to the new contract, although it may not feel like it to some of you, the contracts are completely different to what they were before. The old contract was like a cost-plus mechanism. This isn't. There's a lot of contract governance. The KPIs are very strict. They're aligned to financial penalties. We have strategic performance indicators, like Steve said, that we need to demonstrate a level of maturity by a certain date, and if we don't, that could mean we don't get the extensions that we really need and want. But from the early stages, we really wanted to bid for Northamptonshire. We saw you as a real key client. We had those established relationships with you. And we've got a large footprint in the area as well. We've got 2 corporate offices in Northamptonshire as well. So, you know, we felt very strongly to bid Northamptonshire as one, rather than go into a JV with WSP or someone similar. Excuse me. And as well, to see it could be as long as 14 years, we really felt that gives us a good time to really establish ourselves, work with you, and really give that added value back to you in terms of leaving a legacy and social value. So I mean, the contract started in September, like Steve said. I mean, we had a 3-month mobilisation, which wasn't ideal. It was over the summer period. We went straight into a winter, pretty much, again, which isn't ideal. Usually, these contracts start sort of in April. We also lost a lot of people to WSP at the very last minute. They didn't tell us until the very last minute. A lot of people decided to stay with WSP, which meant we needed to recruit around 50 people, which has been challenging. But it's not like we had, 3-6 months to find our feet. It was Friday, it was the old contract. Then Monday, that's it. It's a new contract, new ways of working, new objectives, new council as well. And we have had to go through quite a big culture change from where we were before as Northamptonshire Highways to move and changing the way people's mindset, the way people think, to get them in the right culture. But like Steve says, it's not been perfect. We've had a few issues, but I think I'm quite proud about how we've dealt with those collaboratively with NNC. They've definitely held us to account on the few things that haven't gone as good as we wanted them to, and we've really worked together to make those improvements. And those improvements have gone for a contract governance board. We have to do corrective action plans, which have to be presented and right up to sort of the Graham Keynes level, and we need to make sure we implement improvements. Otherwise, there could be other implications, and we've really done that, and which I suppose is because we haven't really seen a reoccurrence, touch wood, in those issues around bit quality issues, which we acknowledge, and which Steve said it was the first 6 or so months of the contract. We're still finding our feet, still recruiting, still mobilising. We had a massive spike of inquiries. We were doing our best to maintain that business as usual, keep the network safe, which did mean we had to draft in some additional supply chain, which obviously went through the right checks, but from looking at some of the quality, it wasn't up to the standards we expect, and we have dealt with that now, and we have put plans in place to hopefully prevent that from happening again. We've recruited a lot more local people, so there's less reliance on supply chain. But yeah, we've had those 3 caps around the sort of the customer side, the defect side, and as well the emergency response, which is a 2-hour response. I think we failed 1 or 2 by getting it just outside of that time frame when we had a bit of a storm. Thanks, Steve. So like I touched on with the SBIs, so strategic performance indicators, there's 9 focus areas, and you can see sort of things we're measured on, and there's 5 levels of maturity, which are quite detailed about certain things we need to achieve by a certain period of time, and we've already started that process. We're pleased to say we've hit that level 1 maturity. We've got a workshop planned with NNC in the new year to go over any potential issues there could be with that level 1. If there's certain things where we maybe haven't quite got to grips with, but generally we've hit that first level of maturity, and that will hopefully be signed off in the new year. And we do have a number of commitments as well. So for Kia, when we were awarded the contracts, we've committed to doing a lot of things, lots and lots of things actually. So I thank our bid team for that. There's hundreds of things that we've committed to, but they're not things we've forgotten about, where we just put in part of our bid and then we can sort of, forget about it now. We've been awarded a contract. NNC were quite strict with us to making sure we don't just forget about its commitments. So they've all been taken out of our documents, contract documents. They've all been put onto a system, so it's visible for everyone to see. And we're being monitored and measured against all those commitments to make sure we do what we said we was going to do, really. And I suppose that Steve mentioned about the social value that sort of means a lot for Kia and for me personally, and we have really, I think, done well for the first year of the contract to really strike up quite a lot of sort of key partnerships. And that was, in the first year of the contract when we're mobilising, trying to find our feet, it was quite good. We sort of swung into action so quick. So I'll just pick out a few, but I don't know if any of you are aware of Creating Tomorrow's College, but they're a sort of a disabilities college based in, I think, Chester House, I believe, or certainly near there, that we've been working with, giving work experience to go and talking to the students. So we're really happy with that. HMP 5 Wells as well. We have a making ground commitment where we give ex-offenders a chance, either through apprenticeships or work placements, and Rottle as well, return on temporary licence. We've got a good relationship with HMP 5 Wells. We've also committed to establishing a training academy there. So whilst they're in there, they can learn some key skills. So when they come out, they can become sort of equipped, ready for work. Northamptonshire Children's Trust as well. We've worked with Colin Foster and the team and made a commitment to work with them, support them, get care leavers back into careers. So we're really pleased with that. And also within NNC itself, with the job clubs, we've been supporting them there, and also NNC EADS, which is Employment and Disability Services. We've worked closely with them as well. If they have any CVs or people they feel could be right for a job, they don't go through the traditional route. They can come direct to one of our members of the team, and we'll give them automatic interviews, and we really try and support them as well. And we're also supporting the NNC's Big 50 vision as well. We partnered with Tresham College on that as well. They have around 500 students, construction students, who we're working with, and we're going to the next meeting, I believe, is in February. There you go. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, John and Steve. We'll now go to questions from the floor. Anyone would like to go up? Nobody's burning. Oh, sorry, here we are. Yes.
Chair, look at this. You're doing an absolutely brilliant job. Everything is green, and I don't know why my post box is full of people complaining about Kia, because all I get is people complaining about the roads not repaired, pavements not repaired, shambolic delivery of service. It's like the king. It's Christmas. It's like the king's new clothes right now. We're trying to say everything's great. It's not. And I've been a councillor for many years, and I have no idea how that the top line of 5.1. I've read it. I've got no idea what it's on about. It's not simplistic in any way. Percent 2 in brackets 2 to the number 2 DP. 90% of what is very poor. You've got to give us information that's easy to understand. This is just not able to understand. I can't read that on my screen. KPI handbook calculation, B/A times 100. What does that mean to a councillor? I've got no idea what that means. No, if any of you understand it. Does anybody understand it? And if you give us information, it's got to be easy for us to understand, because we've got to go and tell the public that we represent. And you go on to talk about emails that you've had. You're saying that you've had you've had no complaints. I just can't believe you've had no complaints. I'd like to know what generates a complaint and what doesn't generate a complaint. But you had 48 emails. Are they all saying how good you've done, or are they complaints as well? It's just, this is not the greatest report to understand ever. Kia, for the people of Corby, and I can only talk about the people of Corby, you failed us on the grounds maintenance contracts for many years. You failed us on the roads contract for many years, and what people are telling me, and I want you to succeed, and I know that the members and the officers are working very hard on it, but people that I represent, they're out there in the street, are seeing that you're not delivering for us. And I put in complaints, and I went around with an officer in the summer on really, really bad pothole roads around the ward where I live. Nothing's been touched. I've complained about a fence that they were going to put to stop parking outside Our Lady School. That was 2 years ago, not being done. And we have to deliver. If you make promises, we have to deliver. I understand that this government are giving you no money. I understand that. So we're all in that same pot. But don't come here today and tell us how good things are, because they're not good. Thank you.
Would you like to come back
Yeah,
on
I'll come back to that. I think what I was trying to sort of portray in the report is there's a difference between what we're asking Kia to do and the level of service we provide as authority and their performance against that level of service. And the condition of the roads, the number of potholes we repair, that's symbolic of the level of service we deliver, not the Kia's performance against that. So, as I was saying earlier, we have a categorisation of potholes. That's the council's policy, and that categorisation is at a level that we will repair ones that are deemed unsafe, and there's sort of quite a large booklet of what that means and what becomes unsafe. Ones that aren't within that threshold, we do not repair. So the fact that there may be lots of potholes out there doesn't necessarily mean that it's not Kia performing. It means that is outside of our policy in order to repair that level of pothole. So that's what I want to try and get across today, is that there's a distinction between the Kia performance and the council's policies and what we're asking Kia to deliver.
Our policy is now not to repair potholes. That's what I'm saying.
Our policy has always been to repair defects on the road that we deem unsafe.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think the word policy, it's just such a general word.
Yeah.
It might be an idea for, to follow up on this meeting, to give us some. I know about the P1234 that we've been told many times, but there might be other policies like how long are you allowed to hold up the traffic, because we have constant complaints where people have put up bollards and gone home for the weekend and come back and remove them on a Monday. What any of these other rules that you are our policies, if you could give us those, not necessarily now, but as a follow-up, I think that would be useful.
Well, one of the things we are proposing to do is a lot of our policies are still the old Northamptonshire County Council policies, and we're undertaking a review of those, and the intent will be to bring them to scrutiny prior to getting them adopted. So we're fully intending to come through sort of the various governance processes to get member input into those policies.
Because I think it's not just potholes.
It's not.
I'm sure people, there's bollard cleaning, white lines, clearing of vegetation, all sorts of things. And I've seen this week quite a few complaints about roads and pavements full of vegetation. Yeah. So, how often are they done, and what the criteria are for those would be quite useful.
Absolutely. As I said, the intent is to develop Northamptonshire policies and bring them forward at a later date.
Councillor Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation and the information. So I'm sort of starting this accepting that it's a new contract. So I don't want to harp on too much about problems of old, because that would be grossly unfair on everybody. And from what I can see, and Councillor Pengelly would speak for everybody when you would appreciate that our inboxes are full of complaints. They're bound to be. There isn't enough money around to actually fix all the potholes, clearly. So that's always going to be the case. From what I've seen over the last year, I've seen an improvement. As it happens, it could just be my area. So I'm comfortable that we're at least moving in the right direction. I do agree that it is easy for reports to be written and stats to be presented thinking that we are experts in highways, and we are absolutely not. I was interested to see that you're now exporting all of that data into a Power BI system. So it would be useful, I think, if we could use Power BI to produce dumbed down reports that actually would be easier for us to read. It would be nice to know the percentage of potholes that are reported and how many have been fixed. It's great to know square meterage, but it just doesn't mean anything, of course. You know, so I was trying to work out in my head what that meant, and you can't do it. But it would be nice to know how many potholes are reported, the percentage that have been completed. And I presume if all of that is stuck in some Microsoft system, then we may even be able to get it by area or by ward. So I'd certainly be interested to see that, because that would be really useful, because when we are defending the contract, and that is always what we're trying to do, of course, we're trying to explain to the public that the council are doing everything we possibly can. I believe that to be the case. It's nice to know specific information. So I would ask for that. How are we getting on with Street Doctor? So is that fit for purpose still?
So Street Doctor is actually a national system, or it's a system called Fix My Street that sits in the background of that. Nationally, it tends to be the only one that councils use. If they're not using their own reporting system, they tend to use it because it does meet so many of the requirements of most authorities. What I would say is that it probably doesn't currently meet North Northamptonshire's needs because it's a joint contract with West Northamptonshire, and therefore any changes we've got to agree with West Northamptonshire. But the contract for that comes to an end in March next year, and we are beginning the process of procuring our own system of Fix My Street, which will give us a lot more potential to add on other bits that can be reported, extra functionality to be able to feed back to members of public who are reporting through that. So that it will have more autonomy to make it fit for what we need it to be, rather than what between ourselves and the West need it to be.
Chair, if I can come back, that's okay. So when the contract comes to an end and we get our own system, it's still going to be using Fix My. I think of it Street Doctor, but okay. That answers the question, because of course I know that system well, and it always seems to me that it needs to be tailored, because of course you've got to get that information out into the specific way that you're reporting and recording all of the events that are on there. So okay, so that's interesting to hear, because we should see an improvement, or we should see a more seamless transfer of data that the public put into that system to the data that ends up on your system that gets pushed out in the Power BI reports that potentially we can see. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then, Chair, if I may, my last question. John, you mentioned that there were some quality issues. We would all understand that in the early part of the contract. You mentioned that was probably due to having to outsource, I guess, trying to find staff that you didn't have. How confident are we now that those problems are resolved for the long term? Have you got permanent staff on board now?
Yeah, so as John mentioned, when the contract started straight into winter, which was a problematic start on the off, what then happened was, and it was part of that culture change from the KWSP contract, new technology coming in, new systems, handheld tablets, how to use them, what information we can gather before, interim, after photographs, etc. So there was a bit of a training and a competency stage, which doesn't happen overnight. So that was sort of across the board as well. So what we did as part of that, we had our specialist teams within care come down to the contract, run through the training program. They went through all of the quirks that were in the tablets, because nothing is perfect, and you've got to weed through some of the issues. And through toolbox talks, regular monitoring, the quality assurance inspections, that regime, it's not just going out on site and everybody can go and look at a pothole when it's completed, but it's the desktop survey, looking at the photos that have been provided, doing that extra bit of due diligence, supervisor regimes in terms of their inspections, instead of them going out and visiting as many gangs as they could, it was spending more quality time with them until they were happy with the way that we were expecting them to work. So that's all now being in place, and what we do as well, instead of resting on the laurels with that, we do hold regular toolbox talks, briefing sessions. They happen monthly as a matter of course, but we also brief out the quality of work to make sure that people are going through. And as part of our own quality inspector, if there are any issues that we see, or say, can you go look at specific gangs, we've got that additional resource in now that we didn't have at the beginning that can target certain areas, make sure that they've got the quality of work up to scratch.
Can I just, sorry, do you mind if I just add to that as well? So we've got more of our own permanent members of the team now, which we didn't have previously, and we've got another recruitment drive in the new year to try and bring more people in, so we can have less reliance on the supply chain. We also made a commitment that we'll self-deliver more, so we want to do more ourselves. So there is a real push to do that self-delivery. I know we keep kind of, and it might sound a bit like an excuse, but we were, the first few months we were caught a bit off guard with the winter coming. We didn't quite have the supply chain resilience that we wanted back then, but we've now got that. We've got that confidence in our supply chain. Those supply chains, some of them that were with us from day one, are no longer with us, so I think we're in a lot better position now than what we were at the start of the contract.
Thank you.
Could I just finish off on that? Yeah. Because I think, for me, the proof in the pudding has been that at the beginning of the contract, it was very much the council identifying issues and then reporting them back to Kier. But since these new regimes have come in, what we're getting is Kier telling us we're aware of that, because as I said, nothing ever goes perfect every single time. But there will be times when we get reported from Kier. We're aware of that. We are getting to fix it. So it's much more Kier advising us when they found poor work, rather than us having to go back and kick Kier because we found poor work.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. You've actually answered two questions by Councillor Wilkes, but going very much down to ground level, Fix My Street works for local things. I walk around my patch, I report it, I see how long it's going to take, and it gets reported back. Coming over today, I knew exactly where one pothole was. So I deliberately moved to the left of the road and hit another pothole. Now, how do we actually report that? Because when you're out driving, I just wonder if you've got teams going out to check, because we're not in a position to be able to stop on the middle of the A14 and see exactly where we are to report an issue which could cause quite a serious accident. Thank you.
So there's two things for that. Firstly, on Fix My Street or Street Doctor, you can give an indicative point on a map on where it may have been. But Kier do also go and inspect every single road, and depending on the sort of how busily used that road is will depend on the frequency that they go to inspect those roads. So something like the A14 would be inspected on a monthly basis, so that they could identify those. And most of the potholes we repair are ones that are identified by ourselves rather than being reported by members of the public.
That's interesting. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Yes, just a quick one. The 4,000 tonnes of salt that you have in reserve, I was just trying to picture that. It's hard to picture it, but imagining it in this room, it sounds like a lot, but if we had another beast from the east, is that sufficient preparation?
It is, and the level of salt we have to retain is actually dictated by the learning from beast from the east. So every council has to have a set level of salt in preparation for a similar sort of winter, not just for itself, but to have availability for supporting other agencies should it be needed.
Councillor Watt has a question.
Thanks. First thing, might actually clear something up for me, is that how is the contract and potholes arranged? Are you paid per pothole that you fix, or is it just a fixed price contract throughout the year? And if you have lots of potholes, it's going to cost you a bit, and if you have less potholes, you've saved money. So that's the first thing. Then the other thing is, you kind of get the gist of how it's going by your own experience of the things that you report. And whether they actually get done, or the pain that you go through to try and get things done. My example here is I think it's 427 past the Steelworks, which is actually a cycleway, and it's taken me. It is cleared now, not satisfactory, but it is cleared largely, and it took me months and months and months to actually get the response on that. We're trying to encourage people to walk and cycle, and we had in places a track that was like a foot wide of pavement, and at points there wasn't even any pavement because you could see where the bikes went round on the path. So that's my experience. It has been cleared back. I made the suggestion: don't just clear it back to the edge of the path. Go 2-3 years growth inwards, because as soon as the nettles come up, they're on the path. So. Steel Road, Phoenix Parkway. Keep moaning about that. The carriageway is terrible. It is like a relief map of the moon, and nothing happens. And there's holes in there. It's reported. I reported it, and nothing's happened. And if you say that most of the stuff is done by Kia when they go along and they notice it, nobody's noticing it. Bangrave Road, A43.
Do you want
and
to,
just these examples of what my experience is. And I reported this probably a year ago, and it's delamination of the carriageway, where the central, the seam is breaking up, and it's getting further and further and further. Nothing's been done about it. This is my experience. A pavement next to the Vauxhall garage near Asda. Reported it probably a year, coming up for a year now. There is no pavement. It's all overgrown. On the situation about the pavements, I mean, this is quite complicated because the pavements, I understand now, anything on the 40 mile an hour carriageway is done by Kia. Below 40 miles an hour is done by Northants team. But what I'd like to see on this stuff is a schedule of maintenance. That stuff on the pavement clearance is a schedule that it is going to get cleared, because I don't believe there is one, because if there was a schedule, it would get cleared by now. So earlier in this year I reported it. I drive past it regularly, and nothing has been done about it. And you kind of come to the thing where the public come to with potholes, and you say most of the potholes we fix are the ones because we notice them, because they go, why report it? They don't get fixed. Yep. So that is the public perception, and I'm hoping that we can change that perception. I did make one suggestion to Ben Wright. You're at one end of a road with a truck full of tarmac. Just keep going. Fill every pothole on that road, as you go in. But apparently that truck has got to go somewhere else and fill the potholes that have been reported. But maybe those potholes that you fix won't get them reported. So maybe you could work differently. So fill the little potholes so there can be big potholes. I know there's this definition of a pothole. It's too small to be a pothole, and I understand that from the point of view of the damage it can do to a car tyre. But it's going to be a big pothole in the end, so fill it in. Yep. So those are my comments.
Let you come back on some of those.
I shall come back on some of those, and then I shall pass over to the team here to comment on some of the other parts. With regards to how we pay for potholes, that's one of the changes that's happened in this new contract. Before, it would have been, this is the cost for each pothole, and we paid for that. What this is we will get what we call a target cost. So we predict the number of potholes that there will be. We've got a price that we would pay that was part of the tendered price, but we incentivise Kia to try and reduce their costs for that. So anything that comes in under that price, so if they're using new technologies or better ways of working to reduce the cost, we make a share of that saving. We've got full access to all their books and things, so we know that exactly what they're spending to be able to assess that. But we try to do it to incentivise as effective and efficient activity as possible, so that it's all done in a way that encourages us to move away from continuing how we always used to do it and look at more efficient and longer lasting activities going forward. With regards to specific issues, again, I will come back to what our policies are, and it does come down to safety. And using the example, I don't know the exact details of your example, but by the way you described it, if it was still free and there was about a foot, that would just be on the cusp of safety, and as soon as it becomes blocked and there's an issue of real safety there, then that would be when the intervention would happen. Similarly, with regards to potholes, and I said there's a definition of what we call they're all potholes, but what we call safety defects, they're called in the contract. What I would say is that if you look around the network, the number of potholes we would deem to be safety defects are probably about a 50th of the number of potholes on the network. So it's unfortunately, and it does go back to what Councillor Pengelly said, it's a national problem. This isn't unique to Northamptonshire. The amount of funding that's gone into highway maintenance has been fairly static, if not gone down over years. So, for example, the money we get from DFT has remained static for the last 3 years, despite inflation in construction going up 20%. So each year we're able to do less and less, and that's becoming more and more challenging for all highway authorities out there, because it's not just the capital that we've been spending on resurfacing, it's the cost of the revenue schemes, revenue activities we undertake. So each year we're having to reduce what we're able to do.
My comments were overly critical, but Occupation Road was at last resurfaced, and some of these side roads have been resurfaced. So those improvements are welcome. But on my specific points about, I've reported things and they've never even, I think they've been forgotten about.
Well, I'll hand over to Rob, who may know. Do you know any of the detail of any of the ones raised?
When it comes to vegetation in particular, there's other things we need to investigate. Private ownership being one of the main culprits, where we need to run through a process of enforcement, and quite often it gets ignored. But we do follow that up, and then it gets passed over to NNC regulations team to start that formal process. But I think if it's anything sort of a safety issue, as Steve mentioned there, then as being responsible for highway and the safety of the highway, we should be cutting that back. So if there's any specific issues, I've written some notes down of the locations, and I'll follow them up with you, Councillor Watt.
Councillor Pengelly.
Yeah, and I do understand the issues you'll have, because the amount of money you've got to play with is as you said, is stood still or gone down, and when you're trying to repair even more roads, it must be difficult for you. I'm trying to be positive now, because there's a new £2 million fund coming that hopefully the executive agreed to on Thursday. Who will divvy that up? Who will make the decision? Will it be Kia, or will it be NNC? Or I would hope it would be the executive and say, look, where do you want this money to be spent in areas for this £2 million? Because this £2 million that we weren't going to have, that could help do improvements in all of our big towns and rural areas as well. So who will make the decision on how that's divvied up, or will it just go into the pot and we won't see the benefits of it? Because people want to see the benefits of that £2 million. S106 monies, and we're going on to urban extensions next. And how do we make sure that we're getting best value on these new urban extensions? Because for yourselves, it's really important, and Councillor Watt mentioned the road, the worst road I've seen, Councillor Watt, is the two roundabouts. The brand new estate being built at Priors Hall is a mess. I would say that the Priors Hall developers should be paying for that new road to be put in, but I can't find it on any 106 agreement that they were going to do that. And we have to be more cute with these developers, saying, look, you're paying for your, they all say they've got no money, don't they? But they've got to pay more to the infrastructure or we're not going to get any. And I'm going to come back on to, and it's a question, you don't have to give me an answer tonight, the road to nowhere that I asked Graham Kane about 2 years ago, millions of pounds worth of North Northampton money and public money went into that private road. That private road is now open and it needs about 300 metres for it to be the proper circular for Corby. Do we know where that money went? There was £200,000 from Kia that is said in a report to County Council we're going to do an investigation into how to get it finished. That was the old Kia. Do we know how that £200,000 was spent on finding out what is needed to get that road finished? And could you come back to me on a written report on that, please?
Okay, I shall take those in order. So the £2 million, or the two lots of £1 million for this year and next year that's going to executive. The way the highways team prepare their programmes of work is linked to what we call HEAT, and that's almost a weightings mechanism that we use. That as an authority, we do a survey of every single road in the county or in the area, and therefore we can see where the deterioration of each road is. And there will be at different points of that deterioration where you would undertake certain treatments. So where you've got just some beginning of cracking where the water can get in, we'll do surface dressing to stop that getting worse. Where you've got a road like you've described that's really gone past the best, then that needs quite a substantial scheme and probably about 52 times the cost of the surface dressing. So to going in and doing a complete sort of paving scheme on something like that, it's very, very expensive. So we take all that data that we've got and we model where's the best value for spending that money. And we use different indicators such as how well uses the road, what sort of, how many potholes are happening there so that we can try and reduce our revenue expenditure, how often, how well used it is, what essential services are utilised by it. So if it's near a fire station or near a hospital, then that would give it higher weighting as well. So we take all of this information and that begins to build up our programme. So when we do get, or if we do get the additional £1 million each year, we'll use that to identify, well, this was our programme of work. What's the next? What more could we do and move that line down from that modelling in order to identify where we can get the best value for money for the area in utilising that funding.
Yeah, Councillor Watt.
Yeah, my example is Steel Road and Phoenix Parkway, and I understand you're saying like the Section 106 contributions and that. That area of the Corby Industrial must contribute a significant number of business rates to Northampton Council, a significant number. And the road that they have to travel on is absolutely terrible. It is. You wouldn't ride a bike down there. Your fillings would fall out. So considering their contribution, I think that, and if we're talking about surface dressing to stop things getting worse, somebody forgot about this road years ago. Yep. Somebody forgot about it. So hopefully in the £2 million, some of that will be come forward and address the issues on that one.
I was mentioning to Steve the other day that under the County Council, the councillors could put forward roads that they thought were particularly bad, and so that sort of example would be good. It's not just any old road, but one that's particularly bad, particularly needs, and obviously we know the money's not going to stretch to everywhere, and it'll be what's the priority as you've worked, said how you work your priorities out, but it just gives a little bit of indication. I mean, everyone talks about the potholes. There's that. There's also the pavements, and it is if you're elderly and you're walking, there's danger falling over, and we have that constantly. So I assume you're checking will also check for pavements.
Absolutely, and one of the reasons we refer to safety defects rather than potholes is because a defect covers everything on the network. So when we're looking at all the defect repairs, that includes the footway, it includes vegetation, it includes any of those things that could create a hazard for any road user.
I think obviously your priority is the safety, and that we understand. But as I alluded to at the beginning, perhaps if you can see the sort of policies, because people don't just want safe, they want roads that aren't covered in vegetation and things like that as well, and maybe that's beyond our budget, but at least if we know that. The other thing that I thought might assist us is things like statistics of where defects of whatever type, whether it's failure of white lining or bollards not being clean, which is one of my pet hates, or indeed potholes, how many accidents, if you are able to attribute that, have been caused by that, and on the other side, how many insurance claims have been made, and on what criteria payouts are made from the insurance. I know, there are special criteria around that, but I think that would assist, us to know a little bit more as well. It's always, so many statistics, but I think those would be quite useful. Any, yes, Councillor Wilkes.
Chair, I've got one last question. So just coming back, and this goes back to what I was saying about reporting, dumbing down reports so that we can get a better idea as to what it is that we're achieving and what's outstanding and how long this list is. So this extra £1 million. So if we did nothing with it but decided to forget vegetation and white lines, we just decided to spend it all on filling potholes, how many does it fill?
About 4,000.
That's not
about
a lot.
4,000 for that million.
Between. Well,
Probably need my calculator to work out
it
doesn't sound unreasonable what you said.
It depends on what we mean by a pothole. If it's just going in and sort of just filling in the pothole itself, that would be relatively cheap. But what we tend to do is do a patch around several potholes, or use the thermo machine to sort of reinstate failed surfaces. So because it's not a one-size-fits-all, it's difficult to sort of put an exact number that you can then extrapolate up. But I would say in the region between 4,000 to 6,000.
And I appreciate everyone's different, but I was just it's useful in our head. So, and how many outstanding have we got as of this meeting? How many potholes are recorded that need fixing that aren't fixed? Ballpark.
I'm going to put Rob on the spot for that one.
Yeah, ballpark.
I think in terms of defects, this does cover everything. I think we're in and around the 3,000 mark. But what you need to appreciate is, yes, we can have £1 million and get rid of 3,000 defects, but we're also getting 700-800 coming in each month as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's just that revolving door of keeping up with the deterioration of the network.
Yeah, sorry, Jen, that's almost what I was saying. The ones that are coming every month, you are dealing with as part of the contract. I presume we're keeping on top of that. So at the end of each year, that number of outstanding is dropping, hopefully, not increasing. So you're slowly getting on top of it. I mean, the true panacea would be that in 10 years' time, you're on top of all of them, and every month you just have to deal with the 700 new ones. But it's just useful to think that we can get on top of it in theory. I know it's just a case of throwing more money at it, isn't it always? But it isn't out of control necessarily.
We've got a challenging position, but we are no different to any other highway authority out there. I mean, as you know, I'm an interim and therefore work for different authorities, and the experience here is no different to any other authority that I've been working for. It's a national problem, which is why we see announcements like government throwing money when it becomes available into highway maintenance, because it's recognised it's a national problem, not a local problem.
It's interesting that if there are 3,000 defects outstanding and 4,000 will be covered by that money, you will hopefully catch up with that extra money, if not, get a head start. So that is good. Councillor Watt.
Just a clarification. I think earlier on you said you were doing about 300 potholes per day. And if you've got 3,000 outstanding, that's something like 10 days.
There's 3,000 outstanding, but there's more coming in each time. So that you've always, each month, because you've got a backlog of a policy of 6 months to repair some, you've always got what we call sort of work in progress type stuff. That's if they're not outstanding because they're running late, they're just in the system ready for repair. So as and when we schedule for those areas, and the whole point of having 6 months means it's able to be clustered at the same time with the 28-day ones, so that the example that was given earlier of you've got one pothole that the team go out and fix, and then they can fix the ones that are the 6 months at the same sort of time. The challenge with that is if you've got quite a lot of the really urgent ones, and again the example you gave of the feedback you'd had of people not being able to repair that one because they've got to take that material and fill potholes elsewhere, that goes back again to our requirement to fix potholes within certain timescales. And it may be that the example that you had was a series of potholes that had a 24-hour pothole repair time, and that gang was out there going out and making sure Kia hit the times for those 24-hour repairs. And if they'd have stopped and done others, then they'd have missed their 24-hour repair deadline. So you've not necessarily got just one gang going and fixing all the potholes there. You've got different gangs delivering different activities because there isn't a one-size-fits-all for every single pothole.
And how many gangs is it?
10 gangs. That includes the thermal road repair and the roadmaster vehicle.
So it's about 30 potholes each per day. Thank you.
And the sort of gully cleaning, that's on top of that, is it, and things like that? Okay.
How many gully cleaners do we have, Rob? How many gully cleaners do we have?
So with the gully maintenance, it is a shared service with the West. So we have 5 gully vehicles and 1 combination unit. So that resource is split to, it's put where the resource is needed. It's not just the cyclical gully maintenance, it's also sort of the reactive and the emergency call-outs as well as.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you cover a lot of things, I mean, like the winter gritting and all, you know, these other things. So, you know, we always concentrate on the potholes because they're the ones that we hit, especially in the dark, as Councillor Coleman said, and think, oh dear, what damage has that done? So, but thank you very much for coming and, you know, explaining a lot of this. We understand there's never enough money, and if we can possibly get you some more money, I'm sure we will, but it's not really within our remit. So if that's all, then, you know, thank you very much for that, and hope to see you again sometime, you know, in perhaps another year.
Thank you.
Well, go on after that to the next item business, which is progress of sustainable urban extensions across Northamptonshire. I've got Graham down as the report author, but I believe it's he's actually just gone. Rob, you're going to take us through this, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, I'm not sure where Graham's gone or why he's run off. I'm joking. The report, as I understand it, traditionally goes in the name of the executive director, but it is me in the frame for this evening. So the purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the progress of our sustainable urban extensions, and with particular reference to the potential impact that their progress has on our 5-year housing land supply. 5-year housing land supply, as members will probably be aware, is important. It's important to us because of the way in which the planning process works, and in particular when a local planning authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, it invokes a thing called the sort of tilted balance of decision making, whereby some policies are afforded less weight, and therefore weight is in favour of an application to a greater degree than it would otherwise be if you have a 5-year housing land supply, when you take account of all material considerations. So the reason behind that is effectively to try and rewrite, I suppose, what might be seen as a deficit in terms of housing delivery through that tilted balance. Nonetheless, the issue in relation to that is that there is, at the very least, a perceived loss of control by the local authority in terms of where development occurs as a result of not having that 5-year housing land supply. So it is an important thing for us to manage and ensure that we're able to maintain moving forward. I'm pleased to say that as things currently stand, Northamptonshire has a very healthy 5-year supply figure. It's currently 7.46. It works in arrears, and at the moment the team are currently finalising last year's figure, and I understand their expectation is that will also come out at somewhere around 7.4 years, but that is yet to be finalised. So obviously the figure within this report here is the previous year, which ended March 2022. But as I say, what I'm told by colleagues in planning policy team is that we should expect something similar to that for the year ending 2023. So it still remains extremely healthy. Nonetheless, it is important for us to have an eye on the future and our pipeline of sites that feed into the calculation for land supply. And effectively what that looks at are sites allocated through policy, such as our local plan and our Part 2 plans, where they make allocations, and also planning permissions. And what we look at are sites where there is a realistic prospect of an implementable planning permission, so the site being brought forward for delivery within a 5-year period. And that's the kind of basis upon which 5-year supply is calculated. So the report looks at each of our sustainable urban extensions, which have for some time through our previous and existing planning policies been, I suppose, what you might call the backbone of our growth strategy. And we currently have either 6 or 7, and it depends how you want to treat really the Corby SUEs as to whether you see Weldon Park and Price Hall as 2 separate SUEs or a sort of a combined one. If you want to separate them out, you call it 7. Otherwise, if you combine them up, it's 6. Plus, on top of that, a garden village, Tresham Garden Village. So across those, you can see here within the report the planned number of dwellings that those SUEs should deliver over the period of their development, and it is significant, coming in at just under 28,000 homes. They don't just deliver homes, of course. They also deliver key infrastructure, as well as employment land for inward investment, new jobs and so on and so forth, so that we create employment to sit alongside homes, and other things which you would expect around retail, leisure, green infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So they should come forward as something of that scale would suggest, in terms of being a relatively holistic package of development, rather than just a big housing estate plonked somewhere with nothing else to support it and its residents. Excuse me. So the report goes through, and I don't intend to go through each of the SUEs in detail. It's there for you to see within the report. But what we've tried to do within it is to provide a description of the current position of each of the SUEs, and they are in a variety of different positions. So some of them are well underway, and others are, I suppose, just getting off the starting blocks. In the case of Tresham Garden Village, I'm not sure you could describe it as being on the starting blocks quite yet, but we can come to that shortly. So they are in a variety of different stages, and so we describe that within the report, and then I think importantly also look to identify for you some of the key obstacles to the continued delivery of those SUEs, and indeed what we're trying to do to mitigate those obstacles, to enable them to be built out, so that we have that pipeline of development into the future. So I think importantly to say, I guess, as a general comment, sustainable urban extensions are big animals, and as a consequence of that, they are complex. And they're complex for a variety of different reasons. They normally have multiple landowners and other interested parties. They're rarely built out by a single developer. So quite often you might have a main developer or site promoter, but then they will do commercial transactions with a variety of different developers and house builders, and they will then have their own commercial contracts with those for the development of those parcels of land. So quite often what you will see is those SUEs, a little bit like oil tankers. They're quite slow to get moving, they're difficult to turn, but actually once they get up to speed, then actually they're pretty good at maintaining some momentum. And I think Hanwood Park probably provides a good example of that. If you look at the Hanwood Park section, there's actually included there a little table in there which demonstrates the year-on-year housing delivery, and you can see how it started slowly, but actually it's built a significant head of steam now and is delivering quite a quantity of housing in the last couple of years. And that's because what they've done is they've built up a whole pipeline of parcels of land with reserved matters approvals. They've done commercial deals with house builders so that they have a number of different house builders working on those individual parcels, so that what they're delivering there are a variety of different house types, house styles, so it's not all one homogeneous thing. And there is variety and choice for people, but it also means that they're not limited by the capacity of any particular one house builder in terms of how many houses they can deliver over a year. Of course, what will be important with those SUEs is what the market dictates, because what no house builder will do is continue to build hundreds and hundreds of homes if they're not selling them, because it's not in their interest to have empty stock sitting on their books. So that is probably the one factor, apart from the capacity of house builders to actually how quickly they can build, is actually what the demand for the product is as well. I suppose as a general conclusion to these things, they are big and they're complex, and of course they have their challenges. Most of those challenges you'll see when you read through the report tend to be around the delivery of key bits of infrastructure. That's because those key bits of infrastructure are extremely costly. They're not quick to work out how you deliver, because they're generally costing millions or tens of millions of pounds. They need to be funded. That creates issues in terms of where that funding comes from, because it's not always the main site promoter or developer that pays for a piece of infrastructure outright. It may well be, for example, that actually it's a combination of external funders, sometimes with some government funding as well. So an example of that will be Junction 10A, the new proposed junction onto the A14 to service Hamwood Park, where actually the funding mechanism for that should be, fingers crossed, and it does rely upon a government announcement on RIS3, but it should hopefully be a combination of DFT funding through the RIS3 programme and the developer also funding some of the work themselves. So it's a combination of funding that provides that key infrastructure. And of course that's important because if it's left to the developer alone, and to some extent this comes back to a comment Councillor Pengelly made on the previous report, then actually we tip ourselves into issues around financial viability. And as frustrating as that might be for us as a locality, because it certainly does create issues in terms of funding gaps with infrastructure. The government policy through the MPPF in relation to financial viability says that as a local planning authority we must take account of it, and we must allow the developer to make a reasonable profit as well. And as a consequence of that, by and large, and certainly around this area, because of the economics of land values, house prices and so on and so forth, it creates a situation where actually developments very rarely completely wash their face in terms of being able to provide and pay for all the infrastructure that's required. Roads is just one thing. It can be, sewerage, it can be electricity substations, as well as obviously other important things such as education, health provision and so on and so forth. So there is a whole variety of infrastructure to be provided through SUEs, and generally they are not cheap. Primary schools, to give you an example, primary schools probably coming in at somewhere around the £7 to £10 million mark. Secondary school is obviously some way north of that. So, they are expensive bits of kit to provide. So we continue to work our way through those challenges with the developers, and that's described for you in the paper as well. I guess it's important to acknowledge the fact that actually it's not all plain sailing, but we I suppose have a good awareness of the challenges that we need to resolve, and we are working our way through how we resolve that with those main developers or site promoters, along with other parties such as National Highways as an example, or Department for Education as another example. However, I suppose what I would say, coming back to the issue of our 5-year housing land supply, is, as I said at the start, we're in a very fortunate and healthy position in relation to that at the moment. And what we do have on most of these SUEs that are currently underway is a pipeline of parcels of land and reserve matters applications, etc., that mean that we have a number of years' worth of land which is developable and therefore counts towards our future 5-year land supply. We also have in the longer term, of course, coming forward, a new local plan for Northamptonshire, which will obviously make strategic site allocations as well as it comes along. The timeline for that at the moment through the local development scheme is targeting submission to Secretary of State around spring 2025. So that's not actually that far away. And obviously that will also feed into our longer term 5-year supply as well, because obviously that local plan will look at making site allocations in a plan period up to 2041. So there are a number of mechanisms there that I think give us a degree of comfort and assurity that we should have we should have a healthy 5-year supply into the future. Nonetheless, I'm not suggesting that we don't need to resolve some of the issues that we have with our SUEs to enable them to be fully built out and not over future years start to sort of, I suppose, grind to a halt because they hit a problem and actually have to stop building because they haven't delivered something which needed to be delivered at a certain point during the development. So I hope that gives a good overview, Chair, of the report. Obviously, I'm happy to try and answer any questions members might have.
Okay, Councillor Pengelly.
Yes, apologise for cheering during the meeting, but you probably heard that Peter Bowen's got 30%.
Sorry, I don't think we need to.
30% of people
yeah, sorry, that's not appropriate.
It is applicable in
that's not appropriate at the moment.
Councillor, that's not appropriate for the...
now move on.
Councillor, that's not appropriate for this debate.
Sorry?
Councillor, that is not appropriate for this debate.
We're a political organisation. I apologise if it's not appropriate, but I thought people might want to know. Moving on, Chairman.
Where's Nick Brown?
Sorry.
Moving on, Chairman. Questions for you. Tresham Village, I'm a little bit concerned about the report which says there's little progress being made. And it goes on to say that Homes England have contributed amount of funds for it, and they said that they commissioned a report. Have we seen that report? Because snippets I'm getting is this report, I don't know if we've got it or not, but there was some money spent on wages and other things. Homes England are on about taking the support away from this. What will that mean? Because that's 1,900 homes that we will lose. Do we know if Tresham College is going to happen or not happen? The report is very critical of what's happening there from reading it. So could you explain to us what's happening on that? And the second one is to do with 42 in this, the land west of Corby. As you're aware, the developers are doing a good job in meeting with different parties right now, telling us what's going on. They're saying they're going to do a viability study. They're telling us that they'll probably be coming back with more affordable housing. Right now it's only 5% in stage 1. I hope that viability study does not come back and say there's going to be less affordable housing, because we need, we need, and the new Labour government of course will provide more rented houses going forward, and that's what we need. And I'm just wondering what your view is on what's coming up on west of Corby. They're also, I don't know if you've been to the meetings, Kevin, on about the different access now. They were going to start off at the top of Danesholm Road, now they're going in Cottenham Road and whatever. All I don't want it to be is that being detrimental to the people who live on the west of Corby, because there's got to be, when we talk about new money for roads, we were hoping to get a lot of money from that scheme to improve some of the roads around Corby that will be feeding that, as you're aware. And yeah, I think that's it for now, Chair.
Bob would like to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So on the issue of Tresham Garden Village, and I mean, I think it's probably worth saying at the outset in relation to the Garden Village that that was always seen in policy terms as an opportunity site. So it's not like the other SUEs, an allocated site and relied upon for our 5-year housing land supply. So you might describe it as a windfall, I suppose. If it comes about, it will be additional homes, many people would see that as being a good thing. Going back a few years, yes, we managed to get Tresham Garden Village into the Garden Village programme run by Homes England. As a consequence of that, we did receive capacity funding from Homes England, which provided us with funding for officer support, but also a number of other things around, for example, viability, project management, and so on and so forth, to try to work with the site promoter and the landowner to get that proposal to a stage where planning application would be received and considered by the local authority. The proposals, I suppose you might describe, hit something of a challenge because, as I understand it to be, the landowners were very keen to have a very high quality development. They didn't want something, I believe, which was, I suppose, what you might call a run-of-the-mill housing estate kind of thing. And as a consequence, what I think they did want to do was to limit its size. However, as is often the case with developments of scale, and although we call it a village, 1,500 homes is still a development of some scale. There is significant infrastructure that has to come with that, and indeed electricity substation is one of those things, as is the highway access into it, and those things come at a cost. And that tipped the proposal into an issue around its financial viability. So the Homes England money was used to explore the options around infrastructure delivery, and as a consequence of that work, where it ended up was it was seen that actually the development needed to increase in scale from 1,500 to 1,900 units, which would effectively increase I suppose the amount of accessible funding available to then deliver the infrastructure that was required to bring the development forward. So we reached that point working in conjunction with the site promoter. In particular, the site promoter works with the landowner. However, that's as far as it's got. I think it will be fair to say that officers are disappointed that an application is yet to come forward. That doesn't mean one won't come forward. We remain in contact with the site promoters, and we have received assurance from them a number of times to expect an application. Our understanding is that the delay in receipt of that application is simply the commercial deal or the promotion agreement to be done between the landowner and the site promoter, which is the thing, that commercial deal which has to be in place before they can actually submit a planning application to the local planning authority. So effectively, we did reach a point with it where I would have thought it was pretty much ready to go in terms of an application coming in. We stood by to receive that. We still would be ready to receive that and start work on it. But as you rightly say, and as the report says, it's been a little while now between doing the work to get to that scheme which looked as though it was viable and an application dropping onto the doormat. And as a consequence of that, Homes England are, I think, rightfully asking some questions around whether or not they continue to invest money in capacity funding for that garden village, because arguably the work had been done to get it to the point of an application, but the application hasn't come in. I think we would all be very keen to see that application come in, but it sits fairly and squarely with the site promoter and the landowner to sort out their commercial deal before that application comes in. That's where we are with it. So I don't think it's off the cards, and it's certainly something that I think we would like to see come in, ideally in the not too distant future.
I think Councillor Brackenby would like to come in on that point. So,
thank you very much, Chair. And you will know yourself, Madam Chairman, that Tresham Garden Village has been one of the thorns in our side for some time in respect of its deliverability. In fact, it's an interesting evening tonight, isn't it, Madam Chairman? It's highways one end and potholes, and now we're on to planning. It's you do get the good ones, don't you? Anyway, on a more serious note, Tresham Garden Village was this exemplar development. It is a windfall development. It does not come into the calculations for the 5-year housing land supply, and it's important to bear that in mind. This is anything we get out of the Tresham Garden Village in terms of numbers is a bonus. But the landowners were very clear that they wanted it to be something of an exemplar development. And negotiations have been going on for many years between the landowners, the site promoters and the local planning authority to make sure that it is an achievable objective and satisfies all parties, including the landowners, and the considerable external interest in terms of infrastructure and highways and other aspects of getting transport to, from and across the site. The site has increased from 1,500 to 1,900 on viability grounds, and that was, we thought, considered acceptable by all parties, but there still seems to be the delay in getting the promoters and the landowners to come to an agreement by which a planning application can actually be submitted. So as Northamptonshire Council, some years down the track, as colleagues will know, we are still sitting on this interesting project which hasn't got a planning application, which we cannot yet determine. And I know there's a lot of effort going on into bringing this out. It is also interesting that DLUC are now querying what they're doing and provision of future capacity funding and so forth for this project. And as Tresham Garden Village was an early garden village proposal, that's obviously rather concerning. But of course, equally, DLUC want to see results. So it can be, Chair, that this pressure coming from government may perhaps help the landowner and the promoter to get round a table and come up with something that can be submitted to the local planning authority for consideration. So that's my understanding of it, my totally amateur understanding of it. You've got officers who know much more about these things at your disposal, and of course Mr. Richardson, who isn't here tonight, is also our planning policy chief and is also very much involved in this and the other SUEs as well. But that's my thoughts on Tresham Garden Village, and I'm sure Mr. Harbour or anybody else will be glad to answer.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Pingelly.
And I'd like to, because all these urban extensions, a lot of work was done by the Joint Planning Unit, of course, in putting them together. They did a lot of work, and this was
that's worth pointing out.
Working together before a unitary many years ago. My worry, and I think you've reassured me, Rob, that the money from Homes England went into the council, not to the developers. So we've had that money, the developers haven't had any of it.
Chair, through you, yes, that's correct. So it was capacity funding paid to the local authority, and it was at the time, as you rightly say, paid through the joint planning unit.
Yeah.
And that's been used to fund and progress certain studies and also officer capacity to try and get that thing to the point of an application.
And final point on it, the risk of that money being taken away from Homes England, do you think that will stop that scheme going ahead if that, because I don't know how much of that money is spent, I don't know if it's $500,000 or whatever, would that mean the scheme will go ahead if that money is pulled, or you just don't know?
I doubt it, because you know, in the grand scheme of the finances of Tresham Garden Village, you know, it's probably a drop in the ocean. From our point of view, it was extremely helpful money in terms of being able to provide that capacity and allow us, as a local authority, to get stuff done, which helped the site promoter move the scheme forward. Once they get to the point of an application, you know, then obviously the application to a large extent sits with the local planning authority. You know, applicants have to do their bit as well in terms of ensuring that they provide the necessary information to enable us to determine the application at the end of the day. But then in terms of the development, well, of course, there may well be future discussion that the site promoters might have with external funders around who's paying what towards a new road or an electricity substation or a primary school. But that's a slightly different matter to Homes England capacity funding.
Well, Tresham is quite an exception, really, when it comes to these SUEs, I think. So, Councillor Watt.
Thanks. If you look at the figures here and you count up, obviously, Pricehall, Weldon Park, Tresham Garden Village, West Corby, that's 46% of the increase is in the Corby area. That's obviously going to have an impact on the roads around Corby, and it is having an impact on the roads through Weldon Village, which is no longer a village. It's encircled by Weldon Park and Priors, and some of the roads through Weldon are seeing 2 million vehicle movements a year, and this is having an impact on the local residents. So going forward, I mean, with the Weldon Park development, highways and planning have managed to achieve a relief road that is actually slower than actually going through Weldon. And obviously people don't take the slow route. So on the subject of infrastructure, you know, money has got to come forward, and highways and planning have got to work with the residents of Weldon, the Weldon Parish Council, to alleviate the problem that they've got with these 2 million vehicle movements. Weldon Parish Council want to work with highways and planning. It's a bit of a struggle, and hopefully things will improve. We've had a recent meeting. But the example is there of of what's happened with Weldon. We don't want it to happen with other existing developments with these sustainable urban extensions. And if I could say, I don't think that Tresham is a sustainable urban extension. It's not an extension, it's a village on its own. It's going to introduce a hell of a load of issues going forward for things like, where's my bus? I think it should be attached, anything like it should be attached to existing developments and not out in the middle of nowhere. And as you said, supplying electricity to it is a cost, whereas if it was some attached, there would be less cost. Probably the roads would be less cost. So going forward, and with a potential 46% increase in homes, the 46% increase, which is going to have significant impact in the Corby area, we really do need to think about the highways around Corby and planning for them, and not make the mistakes of the past that we've done with Weldon.
I think it's hit the nail on the head, really, because these SUEs, they take such a long time to come forward. The Section 106 is done at outline. 10, 15 years down the line, nobody really understands what the costs will be, and sometimes that infrastructure is far more costly. So I'm quite interested that some of the applications have had phased viability, which does seem to at least offset that, so that they're not just looked at once, and a couple of them, Hammer Park's one example, I think Glenvale Park as well, of having a second outline application, so that allows them to be reviewed. But I think one that I'm a bit concerned about myself, as it's in my patch, is the High Hayden one, because officers are starting to consider draft Section 106 heads of terms, but the viability study, the issues to resolve, including the applicant's final viability position. The report suggests that this is sometime in the new year, February. It's actually going to Rushden Town Council tonight. So I don't quite know how it's managed to get to an outline application if the viability hasn't already been worked out, because that's, you know, big implications.
Chair, well, I mean, in terms of that one, it's the consultation that's taking place that's going to the town council. So it's just part of the public consultation process, and that's because there have been some amendments to the proposals from the applicant. So it's standard. It's a standard thing that we then consult with town, parish councils, statutory consultees, you know, and public consultation as well, where it's appropriate to do so. So that's the reason that's, you know, that will be on an agenda at the town council. In terms of a viability report, that it's not incumbent upon the developer to produce a financial viability report unless there is a viability issue. So if the application comes in and is determined and there is no viability assessment with it, then the assumption on that basis will be that actually there is no financial viability issue, and therefore they have a way of funding the necessary developer contributions that are identified, in line with, of course, the relevant legislation which dictates what can and cannot be applied for through developer contributions. Because, of course, as members will know, it's not simply a blank cheque for anything. There are SIL regulations which dictate precisely what can be applied for through developer contributions. So it's not the fact that there isn't a financial viability assessment that's been submitted to date doesn't stop the application from proceeding. That's not to say that they might not submit one in the future, but the process has to continue on the basis of the submission that comes in from the applicant at any point in time. So, you know, once it's in and it's a valid application, then it's incumbent upon the local planning authority to get the ball rolling and start that process with the information available to it at that time. What then tends to happen, and obviously, you know, has been the case here, is that as that application comes under some scrutiny and consideration, things come to light, such as, well, hold on a minute, where is your, I don't know, ecology report, or, you know, badger survey, or whatever else it might be? And if that information is required before a decision can be made, then obviously we go back to the applicant. The applicant has to undertake the necessary work or whatever. submit that back in to the local authority, and that's the kind of thing which triggers a reconsultation, which is precisely what you're describing, Chair, that is happening at Rushton Town Council, is a reconsultation because of information that's been submitted by the applicant. So that's where we are with that, but I think it is important, of course, because, of course, the whole purpose of this report is to consider progress of the SUEs to ensure that actually we manage and have that pipeline of, of applications and approvals to maintain our 5-year housing land supply. So it's important that we don't just sit on that application when it's in. We have to keep it moving through the system and just try to ensure that we work with the applicants so that they provide everything that we need, so that when it gets to a committee at the end of the day, whether that's in February, March, April next year, that actually the committee is armed with all the information that it needs to be able to make a sound decision about the proposal that's before it.
So I assume then once that Section 106 is worked out, then there'll be further discussions with, say, the Town Council on those.
Chair, yes, so, excuse me. Yeah, so there will be some local dialogue and some engagement around the detail of the Section 106. It's likely that the detail of Section 106 itself might actually come back to a subsequent committee, because that's a fairly typical thing to do. So the outline might come and the committee might determine the application subject to seeing the detail of the Section 106, which then comes back to a subsequent committee. So I think there is still plenty of scope for engagement about what may or may not be in any Section 106 agreement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckham, you wanted to...
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And you'll agree, Chair, once again, it's an old friend, isn't it? Because for a long time we were working on the Rushton Sue, and it is pleasing to see that, like Mr. Harbour's supertanker, it's beginning to get some momentum. There are two completely disparate applications being made. One is much smaller. It's the 500-unit Castle Farm application, which is not to be confused with the major 2,200 application that's being brought forward. But the 500 has now become a live planning application. And the other one is obviously not quite as far forward, but it is pleasing to see that it is beginning to develop legs and is coming forward. I just wanted to point out in the report that it does say that prior to any planning committee in 2024, it is officers' intention to carry out a joint member briefing with the applicants for each application and to allow the opportunity for questions to be asked and any comments from members to be considered. And I think that should be welcome as these, quite exciting projects which have got their difficulties. I mean, Rushton, it's on the right-hand side of the A6 looking north. There are issues, as I think any former East Northants colleagues will know. There are issues of connectivity. There are going to be some pitfalls and difficulties which are going to have to be overcome. So having a sort of decent dialogue with members and with officers and with the promoters and landowners is going to be important. Well, promoters particularly is going to be important to make the delivery as trouble-free as it can possibly be. So I'm sure we'll be talking much more about it.
Yeah, as David was alluding to, we had a Rushton East Board which sat for 8 years discussing this area. So we have had many, many discussions. And that allowed us to put an input into it. So that was, very useful. We don't have that anymore. And I noticed on one of the, I think it was the West Corby, it said there'll be member engagement as well. So I think on all of these, or particularly the ones that these big applications, that is something that I'd like to see is perhaps briefings or member meetings like pre-app meetings, or if it's gone past that, sort of feedback, etc. So that we can at least know what's happening and make any contribution from the local communities, so that we can feed in what is desirable from the community point of view. So I think that's really important for all of them. Councillor Watt, you wanted to?
Yeah, just Councillor Begay touched on it earlier on, affordable housing. What tools have we got to really ramp up the amount of affordable housing in these SUEs? West Corby managed to negotiate it down with Corby Borough Council down to 7.5% of the development, which was very, very disappointing. But I think they had the council over a barrel, as the council did need to start delivering it. Can we be strong enough to these developers and turn around and say, if it's not a reasonable amount, because they've got, is it, would you say, a reasonable profit, and which isn't really defined, and then we could say, well, we want a reasonable amount of affordable housing, which may not be defined either, but we need to deliver affordable housing for our residents, because my impression is that developers will drip feed houses onto the market in order to keep supply constrained and increase their profits. And so for their reasonable profit that they make, how secure are we that they're being truthful in the reasonable profit that they're making?
Through you, Chair, so there's a couple of things there. So firstly, in terms of affordable housing, and I agree, it's extremely important that we try to maximise the delivery of that. In terms of the SUEs, we're constrained by what's already been agreed through, through Section 106 agreements and the like, because that, as you say, Councillor Watt, is something which we've inherited, not just with the Corby SUEs, it's exactly the same with all the others, where Section 106 agreements are, for example, in place, which will set out the amount of affordable housing. Like a lot of these things, affordable housing ends up becoming part of the financial viability consideration. I would suggest that probably the former authorities across Northamptonshire that negotiated with those developers were faced with a situation where, indeed, I suppose if you want to think of developer contributions as a cake, then financial viability effectively dictates what the size of the cake is, and the negotiation is then, well, how big is each slice of that cake in terms of do we want affordable housing to be half the cake, quarter of the cake, an eighth of the cake? Because actually, if you have half the cake being affordable housing, then perhaps there's other stuff which might be a priority for the area, such as investment in highways, new highways infrastructure, schools, or whatever else might be a priority for the area that might not be affordable if your priority is the delivery of affordable housing above everything else. So I guess it becomes a balancing act there, doesn't it, in terms of how you want to use the money that is deemed to be available through that viability assessment to best effect to meet the needs of the area. Of course, affordable housing at a more fundamental level has to be supported by an evidence base and policy which gives us a strong steer and a strong starting point for negotiating and our asks of a developer in terms of how much affordable housing we would want to have. And of course, our starting point at the moment is generally 20%, I believe, 20% affordable. And of course, if there are no viability issues, then that is the expectation, is that a scheme would deliver 20% affordable housing. But of course, if there are those financial viability elements that we need to consider, then it may well be, and that clearly is probably what's happened in the circumstances you've described previously, where affordable housing comes down so that there's money left to deliver other bits of infrastructure that are also seen as being important as well to have. And then your kind of second question, or second part to the question, I suppose, Councillor Watt, which is about financial viability, developer profit, and so on and so forth. I think there is a general indication. I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think the expectation of reasonable profit is somewhere between 15 and 20% off the top of my head. So there is some sort of precedent which actually does give us an indication as to what will be seen as being a reasonable profit margin for the developer. How do we know that they're being truthful and honest in terms of their financial viability appraisals? Well, we do that by employing financial viability experts who go through those appraisals. We use external consultants that specialise in that. We have several of them that we typically use who are well versed in going through those viability assessments and ensuring that actually everything is above board and has been properly accounted for, so that we have a degree of independent and expert assurance from those experts that what's been put to us is, is I suppose genuine and accurate.
Thank you, Councillor Pengelly.
Yeah, you've got such a hard job to do on these urban developments, because it's like there's so much going on in them, and when you look at a viability assessment, it'd be good to know, and we haven't got to that point yet, that because it all comes to, they say we've got no money and they've got to cut this community centre or that leisure centre or cut that road or put more houses on, and then they have the reserved matters where things change, and they all say this is so that they can make a profit. It'd be good if we could, at the end of one of these schemes, see exactly what was in there for the developer, and I don't know if we can manage that. We haven't got through a full scheme yet, and one scheme that we're nearly finished, and it's not part of this, is Little Stanion, which was about 900 homes. I always thought that was an urban extension for Corby. And I'm just wondering, because there were problems with Little Stanion, as we know, because a lot of what was promised was never delivered. We're still waiting for the community centre now, Kevin, aren't we? And I'm just wondering, have we looked at some of the urban extensions and said, this is what worked really, really well, and this didn't work really well, and we can't have a scheme like this again where there's no access to the town centres. Is that something that we will look at going forward to make sure that the ones we put forward are good? And just one final thing, from what I understand, I don't know if it's true or not, and the members from the Wellingborough and East Northampton will know more, I got told that your officers were very, very strong on the housing supply, and they were demanding 20%, where in Corby we were letting developers get away with 5 or 10%, but I got told in Wellingborough they were saying 20%, and which is absolutely brilliant, so well done to them officers.
I thought the policy was 40% in the north of East Northampton and 30% in the south.
Yeah.
So 20 sounds quite low to me.
Yeah.
No, but I think, Chair, I mean, in years gone by, it would have, that would have varied dependent upon the former local planning authority, wouldn't it? And similarly, in terms of what a developer ends up delivering, the percentage of affordable housing would have been down to those former sovereign authorities in terms of, how they prioritise the use of those developer contributions and what was seen as to be the key priorities and the most important things to have that investment in. And of course that no doubt would have varied from one authority to another, and arguably from one development to another as well. And I think as important as it definitely is, Councillor Pengelly, to always review and learn from what's happened in the past, what happens now, and what we deliver now, so that we improve in the future. There are certain things which I suppose are easier to take and translate into future development, but of course, as you well know, there are always sort of individual elements to a new development as well, which means that you also have to sort of consider some of it on its own merit as well. So it's very difficult to completely transport one thing and say, well, it worked there, so it'll work there. Otherwise, I guess we'd have probably found the golden ticket from somewhere.
That's what we want, isn't it?
But I think what Councillor Pengelly said is very valid, that if we can learn from past experience, so for instance, when you're doing the new local plan, is to build on that experience. I don't know if any new issues were being put forward, but if there were, that we would take into account the access and the size of them, what's going to be viable, what's going to another community support, because after all, what Councillor Watt was saying about them being in the middle of nowhere, the idea of these is that they are near an established settlement, so that they can piggyback off the infrastructure of there. Sometimes that works probably better than others. But I think the reason it was brought in the first place to scrutiny was because there was a bit of a concern that they're so big, they're so cumbersome, so lengthy, that it sort of almost overwhelms the planning system. And the amount of work that goes into each one is really considerable, and as much phasing as can be done would be obviously advisable for both officer time and for developers to be able to build out as well. So it's just difficult because there are all different stages possibly to judge what the best mechanism is for, as I said before, like bringing several different outline applications or pushing, a lot of reserve matters in all at once, which are obviously got to be phased anyway. So there are different ways of doing it with these different applications that might indicate best ways forward in the future.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, it's certainly a very valid point that that they are enormous animals to deal with through the planning system, and they do require a significant amount of resource input. Unfortunately, we have what I would suggest is a limited amount of control across each of them as to their timelines and when they come forward. And you'll probably note from the report that actually we do anticipate a lot of stuff coming through in the first quarter of 2024. That's not sort of by design, as it were. What that is it's sort of dictated more by the developers and the site promoters. And of course, they will be, for a variety of different reasons, very anxious to see their own particular proposals progress. So it may well be, for example, if you take the likes of Hamwood Park with the new outline application, the site promoters are very keen to see that come forward as quickly as possible, because they have a number of commercial deals which they won't be able to progress until they've got the new outline in place, and clearly they don't want those to fall away for a variety of reasons. but they'll also be concerned and have one eye, for example, on, we touched earlier about the RIS3 programme from DFT and the funding of Junction 10A. And of course, what they don't want is, I suppose, any question mark around whether or not they secure a new outline permission that might end up influencing the external funding of that junction. Now, I don't believe that will be the case, but not that I can predetermine the outcome of a new outline application. But the point I make is that that they will have pressures upon them and reasons why they want things to come forward as quickly as they do. For others, it may well be because of land deals, and actually they may well have options on parcels of land that will expire after a certain amount of time, which will mean they'll then have to renegotiate that land and the price will change, and that changes the financial viability of the scheme for them, and so on and so forth. I wish we could, like puppet masters, control all of these SUEs and when stuff comes forward. But unfortunately, I think our ability to do that is extremely limited. What we do have, I think, importantly, is the ability to negotiate planning performance agreements with them. And through those planning performance agreements, what we can do is to secure additional resource into those services, and that might be, planning case officer resource, but it might also be particular expertise that we need at a particular juncture in the planning process. And so we can, through those planning performance agreements, secure that resource, and that helps to ensure that we have the right capacity at the right time to help progress those through the system, even if there are a number coming through, in a similar time frame.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you. I know that Price Hall and Weldon and what was Little Stannion, they have service charges on the buildings, and going forward, is it on all of these sustainable urban extensions, is it the fashion to go down a service charge route? The reason I ask this is, at the moment, it's good. Price Hall has an excellent standard of grounds maintenance, but going forward, maybe other developers, the standard grounds maintenance may not be good. The residents could be in dispute. What if that is the new way of looking after public open space, what power have we got to give to the residents to ensure that they do get a good standard of maintenance on the public open space?
Chair, through you. So yes, I think it's probably fair to say that probably over the last decade, there has been a significant shift between what might be considered the more traditional route of building a development and then offering up for adoption public open space to the local authority, along with a commuted sum. And then thereafter it becomes the local authorities' adopted land, but they have to take on the maintenance of that space. So over more recent times, there has been a definite shift into less adoption of public open space by local authorities and either placing things like public open space into something like a trust or into a management company where that public open space is managed on behalf of the residents. And that's what you're really describing there, Councillor Watt. Now, arguably, from the developer's point of view, when they purchase the land and have a red line around it, it's their land, including the public open space elements of that, and what they choose to do with that, whether they choose to offer it to the local authority for adoption or retain it or shift it into some kind of trust, it is arguably within their gift. of course, as those developments are built, people buy the homes. They should be being made aware through the conveyancing process that there is a service charge on those properties and what that pays into. And of course, generally speaking, there quite often is some kind of management board which will have resident representation on it, which is the route to ensure that actually people are getting the product that they're paying for through that service charge in terms of the quality of maintenance, grass cutting, litter picking, whatever else it might be. But actually, it isn't something for the local authority to intervene in, because it is actually a private contract between the homeowner and whoever it is that is providing that service.
Okay. Do we have any other queries from anyone? We've got here recommendations recommended that note the contents of this report, and I don't know if we got any recommendations. I mean, I made a recommendation really that member engagement as much as possible. Obviously, it'd be different for each site, because some are further along than others, and the timing of that would be appropriate to individual sites. But I think a couple of them, might be at a stage where I think West Corby mentioned it, of member engagement, and as Councillor Brackenbury said about member briefings on the Rushton one. So I think as much as obviously a lot of work goes on in the background, and we all these consultations and statutory consultees, etc. And sometimes you're limited because of the time they take to reply and things like that. But sometimes it's just nice to know what's happening, as well as being able to feed in any input. So, if everyone's happy that we sort of recommend that members involved as much as possible. Any other comments or any other sort of suggestions? I think, it's a case of keep up the good work, keep pushing, and obviously as much these infrastructure we need in all terms, whether it's schools, health, that these are very important, especially with these big sites, because I know there are statutory things that we can only ask for certain things, but there are sometimes community value, community centre, or money for extra things in the community that can be very useful for individual settlements. So I'm sure that each member from each of those areas will be able to help with suggestions of what is needed in their area. So okay, well, thank you very much indeed. And as I say, it's an awful lot of hard work going into this. So I hope Councillor Pengelly's finally retrieving his nameplate. But so thank you very much for your attendance, everyone, and safe drive home, and also happy Christmas.